You are tuned into the Dr. Tina Show with Dr. Tina Moore. For more, visit drtina.com. Angelo Keely, thank you so much for coming on the Dr. Tina Show yet again. This is your third round, and I'm so excited to have you back.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Tina. I love coming here. I love getting to reconnect with you and just get into it.
Yeah, we always get to get nerdy on the science. It's super fun. So, I first brought you on the show. We were talking about essential amino acids, and we had you back for 2 rounds on that. And I'm a believer, and I'm sold on it. I think the more that I live my life and realize that frailty is coming for all of us, and it's just a matter of time. And then I shared with you offline, but my audience knows my mom recently almost just died, and I did a whole podcast about frailty afterwards because I just believe so wholeheartedly that it is preventable. And then, I gained in that process of my mom going through this, I put on a quick 15 pounds. It was like cortisol stress so fast and just on my gut, like straight up cortisol. I was like, okay, I know what's happening here. It sucks, but I know what's happening. And then you and I were chatting about how we could, have a more nuanced conversation and really talk about body recomp. So I think that's going to be the topic of today. We're going to get into that.
Let's do it. I mean, I think it's not relevant for everyone. Some people are just like born super lucky where they just, I don't know, have like the perfect genetic code to just figure it out. But most of us, myself included, have, just gone through different phases of life where having kids was the first time for me where it's like I suddenly gained like 20 or 30 pounds. I didn't even really realize what happened, and that's not from even being the woman, right, that gets pregnant, goes through all those hormonal changes. It's just like the stress of having a job and a family and not being able to prioritize the things I wanted to prioritize. So I think it's pretty relevant for all of us.
Yes. And I think with my audience in particular, it's, I think, majority middle-aged women, and we're really in the thick of it. Right now, there's something going on, which is so bizarre online. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's this sort of like turf war happening in the online doctor, PhD influencer community. And there's one cohort that's like, everybody gets hormones, and which I'm actually a huge fan of, to be honest with you. And then but in reason, because it really depends on your body composition and your overall health as to how those hormones handle in your body. And then there's this other cohort of people who are like younger women and older guys arguing against hormones, but also are really trying to make this argument that when you hit middle age, your metabolism doesn't change and you just need to work harder. And it's a lack of muscle mass, which I would have believed if I didn't live something different. I hit middle age, I hit perimenopause, and then I'm not menopausal yet, but I'm right on the cusp. I hit that plateau and then, beginning of the cliff. I was in the best shape of my life. I had the most muscle mass I've ever had. I was running DEXAs on myself regularly. Like I was in the best shape of my life, and I still got throttled by the shift in hormones, and I still got throttled by belly fat. It still all happened to me, all the same thing. So I know I'm just an N of one, but like I think that it's more nuanced than that. So I think we'll have a good combo around this today because it really depends. You were a younger guy going through it, and then there's middle-aged women going through it, and then there's older people going through it. And I think there's different reasons. You probably were getting exposed to a lot of your wife's hormones too.
Yeah. And I even think this notion of like, I'm only N equals 1. That said, I think the amount of biological diversity that exists for even people of like, even if you talk about like 25-year-old women, there's a lot of diversity among them in terms of their hormones. And I think now people are more aware of like all the different hormones we may be talking about, but things like the hormones that control our appetite, which there's not just one, there's many. There's as much diversity there as there is with like vision, and even more than there is with vision. And we don't be like, oh, that's crazy, someone wants to wear glasses. It's like, no, actually, like some people really need to wear glasses. Some people might be able to get contacts. Some people have astigmatism. Some people don't. Like there's a lot of diversity. And then when you start adding into that how our bodies change as we age, it's very significant. And so I think anytime I hear someone take this almost like brutally black and white opinion that it's, they want to like fight back against like, oh no, perimenopausal women, like they need the same amount of protein as everyone else, or there's no real difference in how they should be lifting or whatever. They're clearly not acknowledging that there are real different hormonal changes that different women go through. And there's all kinds of other side effects. Like if you just think about how much your sleep gets impacted in menopause. Sleep can have more impact on protein synthesis in the body than even your protein intake.
Yeah.
And so it's like to not acknowledge that in the conversation, like clearly people are, they're trying to make some point
Yes.
and be right about some, abstract fact versus like actually examining what it really means to be a person at a specific time in your life with your specific body.
I feel bad for them because I feel bad for their wives. For all the men out there, there's a lot of men online right now like preaching that narrative. And I'm just like, I feel so bad for your wives. What's going to happen when your wives hit this? Because they're all young, younger, or the women that are younger. And I'm like, you just wait, honey. Because I was in practice and I started in practice in my early 30s. And I had a lot of menopausal women. And my practice was interesting. And I've done a whole podcast episode about this. I was doing regenerative injection therapies. So I was predominantly taking care of healthy, fit, athletic, middle-aged people, because that's who generally has musculoskeletal complaint, joint issues that need regenerative injection therapies. And because it's not covered by insurance, that's generally who has the financial means to pay for such a service. And so I was taking care of like the cream of the crop when it comes to middle-age health. And they still were going through a lot of this. These women would come in good, year after year after year, and they're so athletic and so fit in some cases that they're just constantly hurting themselves. I mean, I was treating women in their mid to late 40s that were doing jujitsu 3 times a week, and there would be these little aches and pains, and I would work on them or treat them. I'm a chiropractor too. So like whatever it took. And they would come in one day and be like, where did this 15 pounds on my gut come from? Why are all my tendons and ligaments suddenly tearing? Why am I not sleeping? Why do I feel uncontrollable rage every time I listen to my husband chew his food? And like, these are real things that are happening that we just sort of brush under the rug because we got to keep going and, it's just stress or whatever. And it all leads to your metabolic health and your insulin sensitivity shifting dramatically. All of those things, the stress, the cortisol, the sleep disruption, all of it. And like, it really takes its toll. So directly, if the metabolism isn't cellularly turning down, there's still all these other things happening. And the lack of estrogen leaving the body makes you more insulin resistant. Like, all of it adds up to a picture where you're just not the same engine anymore. It's a dramatic shift.
And I think that's a good metaphor. You're not the same engine. Like, I think the machine that you are, this biological system that you are, it really does change over time. It's not the same. It doesn't receive, signals the same way that it used to, and doesn't respond in the same way. And honestly, it has different priorities. You can imagine, like, when you're a 17-year-old young woman, like, your body has different priorities than it does when you're a 47-year-old woman. Like, what it's trying to achieve in existence at that time. And so, we're different over time.
It's funny, when I was 17, I went to Germany and I came home and I had gained a bunch of weight because all I was eating was like, I was dating a German boy and his dad was a baker.
Oh man, dangerous.
I was drinking beer and eating baked goods every day. And I came home and I remember just thinking about losing the belly fat, and just came off. It was just gone, and then in my 20s, same thing. In my 20s and my 30s, even after having my daughter, I struggled a little bit there. Probably a lot more than a lot of women do, and probably a lot more than I anticipated, because I normally had such an easy time losing weight. I eventually got it off by having some other things addressed, like my adrenal health, my thyroid health. But the way that you could snap back then was significantly different. And now, I mean, shoot, I could be on a standard dose of a GLP-1, a standard starting dose, very low, baby dose, we call it in my world, and still not be losing a pound if everything else is out of whack. So it's really frustrating. Women will also think if they're given HRT, that's going to solve the problem, they're going to lose the weight, or if they get the thyroid addressed, that's going to cause the weight to come off. And it just doesn't move the needle at all the way that it used to. There's a critical line there that if you go into it with too much excess body fat, it can be very challenging to walk through that, what I call the gauntlet. It's like the perimenopausal into menopausal decade. You're walking the gauntlet. And so this is where I heed women. I say, if you can start training like 35, 40, really around 35, 40, if you can start literally training for menopause, then I think it will be a much easier transition for you. And learning how to eat, and learning how to supplement correctly, and learning how your body responds to things, I think is a pretty critical period.
Just a positive story to share alongside that quite scary picture you shared. Just last night, my wife was telling me, she was like, and she's perimenopausal, and she was just telling me, she's like, in the last few months, whatever, I put on 2 pounds of muscle and lost 2 pounds of fat from like
Nice.
her in body scan, and she's been at it though for like years, and so it's not like an overnight thing, but like for years she's been like really paying more attention to doing all the things, right? It's not one thing. It's like, it's doing all the things and working hard. And I was like, well, what changed? And she had said, I think I was really committed to like 2 times a week resistance training before. And now I've kind of moved it to that 3 to 4. And my diet got like a little bit cleaner but she's not like some extremist. We drink
No,
champagne and hang out and have dessert, but it's like, it's doing all the things, putting them all together.
she revved the engine harder, which
Mm-hmm.
is in the right way, not in the like go, orange theory yourself to death kind of way, but like in the strategic build the muscle, build the fat burning engine kind of way, which is ideal.
Exactly. I try to convince her to do some cardio for her health, and she's like, no. She
No.
does none. Like there's none.
No, I just go walking. I hike.
Yeah.
I literally hike so that I don't attack anyone and lose my mind, because it doesn't matter how much HRT I take. I get hit with these like incremental fits of rage where I'm irritated with literally everybody and everything. And so I'm like, I'm just going to hike in the cactus forest so that I can stay sane and happy, calm.
It's good. It's good for that.
And then I go to the gym to build a booty, which we should also talk about in this, because I think the muscles we choose to build matter. Okay, so you and I were talking, and you had said that fat loss is not primarily an information problem anymore. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think like maybe in the simplest way of saying it, like we know some amount of exercise is going to be good for me. Vegetables are good for me. Soda is probably not good for me. Oreos, there's extremes in this conversation, but the information is available to us. Now, there are people out there, kind of influencers sharing stuff. It's like distracting and probably not as important, but the fundamentals of what it takes to lose weight, and particularly to lose fat and to maintain muscle, we've actually known for a long time. And really what it comes down to more is like, how do you do it? How do you accomplish it? And I think it's relatively simple, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. And I really see it as it's not like this is like this is like a truism and it's absolutely like this, but I like to see it in kind of these 4 main areas. So one area is nutrition. Like there are just kind of facts around nutrition science in terms of what we can be eating that'll be better for us, about energy balance. And it can be different depending on the hormones in our body and what stage we're in. But that's like one main piece of it. Another piece is around exercise science. Like there are certain types of exercises that will assist us more in losing fat and in maintaining muscle than other types of exercise, and the amount of that we do them each week. And it's pretty available. We can go through it today. It's pretty available. And then I think the next 2 are like the harder ones. And they are appetite and kind of psychological regulation, like actually just being able to work through all of my feelings and true hormonally based impulses and drives that are related to appetite, to how hungry I feel, to cravings it's not just in my like, it's not just some like behavioral thing in my mind and just feelings. Like they're actually truly driven by my biology, but also like working through feelings and coping mechanisms, et cetera. And then I think the last bucket is around like environment and habits. And the work around, like if someone's known someone who's, an alcoholic or drug addict of some kind, like one of the first things you say is like, you got to change your environment. You got to change your playmates, and you got to build different habits daily in your life. And so it's like all the different types of habits that we, need to build to have kind of sustainable, healthier body composition, lower fat, more muscle, so we can live a long time and feel really good. So I think it's really those 4 things. And, I can say those and probably people are like, yeah, that makes sense, but then you have to like, how do you actually do it and make it happen? And so I think that's what I mean by it's not really like an information problem. I think I say those things, people generally can understand it, but it's like, well, then how do you actually do it? How do you lose those 15 pounds and actually keep them off sustainably in a healthy way, long-term?
Yes. For me, it's habits. I heard somebody say something once, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was basically along the lines of, first of all, you have to see yourself as a person doing these things. Like you have to believe that you are a person who's doing these things in real time. Like I am a person who makes better food choices. I am a person who goes to the gym several times a week. I am a person who goes for a walk every time I eat a high carb meal. And then you have to just implement as if you're that person. And that was so profound for me. It was like, oh, basically like I create a character that is the version of me that I want to be. And I have a good reference because I've been there. I've been in incredible shape before a few times over. So like, okay, I know I can do that. And some people have never, so they don't have any like true North Star, but they can almost put on a caricature of themselves and say, I am this person now, and then act like that person. How does a person who's in good shape act? How do they eat? How do they move? What habits do they implement and really stabilize in their day-to-day life? And I don't know, but for me, that has been really profoundly helpful. It's helped me in my career. It's helped me in a lot of things, but those habit changes, like if you do the thing, the results will follow. If you build it, they will come kind of thing. So what do you think about that? Like, where do you start people?
Yeah, that's been my personal experience too, and what I've seen really work for other people. The habit piece is a big part of it. I think paired with it too is kind of psychological regulation, emotional regulation, and appetite. Because I'll just give you a perfect example. So for myself, and I'm someone who, and I said earlier when I first had kids, actually, the bakery point you made reminded me. Actually, I think the first time I really gained weight was my first real job. Actually, after college, I moved to France, and
Oh,
and I started eating like a croissant every day, the first thing in the morning, and then it was just like the worst habit for me. So I must have gained 20 pounds in like a year. Um, but yeah, I think it's this relationship between habits and environment and emotional regulation. And so, for example, since October, around summer last year, I I generally fit. My labs are good. I wasn't more muscular build. So like my BMI looks higher, but I had like extra body fat that was made it to where like I couldn't surf as well as I want to surf, and to where like I wasn't quite as like comfortable in my body as I wanted to be. So I was like, I'm ready to be more committed to this journey for myself. And part of that is habit. It is things like, hey, I'm going to make sure I always have this chocolate protein shake ready for me at night, so that when I want to go have dessert or something sweet, that's the thing that I have. And I don't go to the ice cream because I'm someone who has like a sweet tooth. And so there's an environment habit piece that's like connected and related to that. At the same time, sometimes I would have this like emotion, this drive that was like, I just want the ice cream though. Like, I don't want the chocolate protein shake. Like, I want the ice cream. And so in that moment, there's both changing my environment and trying to make the habit work, but there's also this element of needing to develop kind of more mindfulness with myself around this impulse that's coming up. And like, can I just sit here and just like observe the impulse rather than acting on it and not doing the protein and instead having the ice cream? Which maybe my situation is a little more complicated, but I think probably relevant for your audience too. If you have kids in the house, or a husband that wants to have ice cream or something, it's like you can't just make your environment totally pure all the time. It's being conflicted with these other people that you love and live with. And so it's like in that moment, can I like breathe with it and be with it for like a minute? That kind of discomfort where I don't want to do the protein thing. Instead, I want to do the ice cream. And what I found was through sitting with that, through sometimes like journaling about it, through like being with that feeling for a longer period of time, eventually it would kind of go away. And so I don't know how much that's like habit and environment versus actually more of like a psychological practice, which I would relate to what you said in terms of visualizing who I am, like changing my identity and believing I am this person that chooses the right food, et cetera. So I think it's kind of both. I think there's both like, making sure you have whatever the things are you like, cottage cheese or fresh cut vegetables or fruits that are easy to eat, easy to snack on protein, are all these kind of environmental things and like habits you can start to build in, combined with too some visualization of who you want to be, of mindfulness around impulse control, et cetera.
I had always had such an incredible ability to control my appetite to the point of like I had severe anorexia when I was a teenager, and it's a control thing. Like you learn if you can control your appetite, you can control anything, right? Like you can't control anything else in your life, but you can control your body because you can control your food intake. And I was the queen of it. And I always really like prided myself on that. I thought it was some kind of superpower. It kind of is, to be honest. Really establishing control over what your brain is telling you want is kind of a superpower. But then I was having all these other bad habits. Like I smoked and I drank too much. It's not, none of it made sense looking back. But at the time, I'm like, well, I can decide if I eat or not. And I still had really good control over my appetite. And normally high stress situations would put me into an under eating pattern when, like, say, I'd go through a breakup or somebody would die or, something really stressful would happen. I would shrink because I would just lose my appetite completely. And that was not in my control. I just lost my appetite anytime I got too stressed out. Something has shifted in perimenopause where my appetite is out of control. And I saw it happen to my mom, and I didn't believe what I was seeing. My dad kept saying, your mom eats like you wouldn't believe. And every time I saw my mom out, my mom ate like a bird. My mom had always eaten like a bird, but my mom was really gaining a lot of weight during that time period. And this is when she was going through menopause. And I really didn't understand it until I studied it more. But man, there is something to that. And your appetite becomes voracious. And then you add high levels of cortisol on top of it. And something like there was a switch that flipped in my brain this last few months when my mom was sick and we were going through the hospital situation and coming, getting her out of the hospital and getting her back on her feet. I was so stressed out that I completely lost the ability to even pause and think. I was just shoveling anything I wanted into my mouth without, I was too stressed out to even care because I was hanging on by a thread. Like I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I was so stressed out. And I was like, I don't even know what to make of this. So if I sat down in front of something, it was shoveled in fast, almost like I was eating and consuming in a way that was like I was running away from a tiger all the time. So I had to eat really fast so I could get up and run away from the tiger some more. That was kind of the cortisol cycle I was in. And it was crazy. And I knew it was happening. And I was watching myself do it. And it was completely out of control. And so when I got home, I did go back on a small dose of a GLP-1 just to get that switch to flip off or calm down, just to turn the dial down. But I don't want to crank the dose up. And so what I noticed was really what you just said was like that pause. And for me, I might have to leave the house and go for a walk. I might have to take my dog outside. I mean, it's like, I've never had food call to me the way that the last few months has been. And so I think it was this perimenopause picture coupled with this really high cortisol level that just but it's weird, because I'll run patients' labs all the time. And most people are running around in this age cohort, my age cohort, with elevated cortisol levels. I'm sure you are too with the nature of your work. And so there's something to that drives a cycle, and you got to literally breathe through it. I can't have the stuff in my house. I don't have any kids, so I don't have to worry about it, but I can't have the ice cream in my house. I can't have any wine in my house. I can't have anything in my house because there's no off button. And I used to have such a phenomenal off button. So again, if I hadn't actually lived through this, I wasn't believing it as much as I should have when my patients were telling me this 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I was like, oh, you just need to have more self-control. And now that I've actually gone through it myself, I'm like, oh, Lordy, that is a thing. Like, and it's a tough one. And I was really scared. I thought, I have the tools to slow the roll on this and I know what to do. And also going back to the gym regularly and exercising regularly does really help control the appetite too. You really get a much better control over your body. But if I kept telling my husband, if I didn't know what I knew and I didn't have the tools available to me that I do and the ability to go train, I know how to train. I've been strength training a long time. I would be scared right now. Like I would have been very scared that I was going to balloon up to 200 pounds. I'm not kidding. Like there was no off button in sight and it was just out of control. And I've heard that story from countless patients and I didn't believe them. And so I went through it.
That was such a good, honest, real account, I think, of so many people's experience. And just another great example of the diversity amongst different people, because some people are going through that even at a younger age. They're literally having that kind of uncontrolled appetite and hunger. And it really is a complex combination of, yes, there's things around like eating better foods and going to the gym, but you could be doing all of that and still have a different combination of natural production of GLP-1 and GIP and ghrelin, all these different types of hormones in your body, and literally just having a different experience.
Yep.
And yet I think the way that you kind of contextualized it in terms of both you're making the decisions to not have the wine in your house and not have the ice cream, but then maybe you're also considering using a medication to help deal with one piece of appetite, but also using mindfulness to help, not just become fully medicated to where you're like nauseous, you're so nauseous all the time, you just won't eat anything, because that's not what you want, because you want to be able to have an amount of hunger and drive to choose to eat vegetables and healthy proteins and have meals with people you care about and do all that. And so it's all these pieces can like go together, and at different phases of life, it may become very challenging to, just white knuckle it, or like it might not be possible, honestly, because and people are just not the same. And so I think when people try to act like there's this, we're all the same, it's really unfortunate. The other thing too is I think the context of today's world, and not to go like on some soapbox about, big food or something like that, but it is that there is so much food that is available to us that is so palatable. I love the taste of sugar and butter and salt. And there are
Yes.
foods that are just like, so it's like, I won't touch a shortbread cookie, because like that
Yes.
one little cookie is like 100 calories, and I could just I could eat 1,000 calories like that, And so there's a lot of foods like that. And we all maybe have our different things. For one person, it's wine. For one person, it's ice cream. For another person, it's French fries, and it's like our biology was not built around those foods. Those foods have been like introduced to us. So even people, if you look at all of society, I think in general, basically all of American society is much more overweight than it was 50 years ago. Some people though are much more overweight. And perhaps in prior, eras, those people would have been even healthier, right? Because if there's a major food shortage, they might if they have a better job of like holding on to calories and storing body fat, et cetera. But in this new era where calories are plentiful, where food's very addictive, it's delicious. And when I say addictive, I think there's a lot of influencers that want to fight over that. Oh, food can't be addictive, or sugar can't be addictive.
It absolutely is.
It can for some people, and really
Yes.
based off certain people's like internal, hunger hormones, like they have a really different experience of it that might look different than you who can just eat one cookie. Like some people, like it's pretty hard to eat one cookie. Yeah, and so it's like with this modern food environment as well, it's hard.
My practice was predominantly dealing with people in pain, and I have learned through my training and through countless patient experiences that no one person's pain is the same as another. It's not perceived the same. It's not registering in the brain the same. It's not showing itself the same. It's not managed the same. And that kind of like, just get over it, just white knuckle it, deal with it, get over it. I think the same applies to hunger and to what's happening in people's brains with hunger and all of those hormones you just mentioned, and the dance, the symphony, and the orchestra that's happening up there. And that's why I came out in the world and was like, we need to consider microdosing GLP-1s and not macrodosing them, because we don't want to pull, you can't have a big bass drum booming in the orchestra and have it sound okay. You have to have a symphony working together and all balanced, right? And I feel wholeheartedly, as I got deeper and deeper into the GLP-1 research, and then deeper, I very intentionally spent the last 2 to 3 years, all of my CEUs, that all my continuing education that I have to get every year to get relicensed, have all been in the realm of obesity medicine. And I'm not an obesity medicine doctor or expert by any means, but really understanding that drive in the brain. I had a boyfriend once who was really into strength training, and he used to literally cry. He would sit there and almost cry because he was so hungry. He would eat and eat and eat and eat. And if he didn't go to the gym all the time, he'd gain a bunch of weight. But he at least had the gym, but he was like crazy about the gym to the point where he was always in pain. But I remember him literally just like his voice cracking because he was so hungry. And he's like, I don't know what to do. I'm so hungry all the time. And I didn't understand it. I didn't quite, couldn't quite wrap my head around it until last month.
Yeah.
Last month I understood that hunger. But I come from a long line of obese people. My whole family has struggled with obesity, and it's really been interesting to watch. And I was always the skinny one, and I was like, oh, it's so easy for me. And I was kind of a bitch about it, to be honest. And I feel really bad now because I wasn't believing people. I was believing them on how their pain was presenting, but I wasn't believing them when they were telling me they hadn't changed anything. They hadn't, done anything different. And yet here's this excess weight that came on with middle age, the women in particular. And then again, with the folks who had just these voracious appetites, like they all have different leptin signaling and ghrelin signaling and receptor differences and genetic differences. Like there's really something here. And I think the part that no one talks about is if your mother was obese and or metabolically compromised, you're epigenetically tagged. The children that come from obese mothers are epigenetically tagged strongly towards obesity, strongly towards type 2 diabetes. Even the milk that is produced by obese mothers has neurological impacts in the brain of the baby. And so there's some of these kids are coming out just sort of like they're kind of, the odds are stacked against them just from the start, you know?
Yeah, there's really interesting research. I'm trying to remember which institution he's from. He's in the UC California system, Dr. Zachary Knight. But basically, body weight and body fat is more genetically predetermined than even like your height. Like that, and people just don't want to believe that or don't think that. They think it's like, no, it's just discipline and all these things. Like and I'm not trying to say that as like an excuse to then say, don't take care of yourself. I'm just saying like, in contemporary society, based off the current food environment and how calorically dense some of these foods are, I think the vision example is another really good example. Like you don't go look at someone and be like, why are you wearing glasses? You wimp. Why don't you just like fight through it? It's like,
white knuckle it.
my eyes don't work that way. And I think a great example again would be someone who maybe never needed glasses. And then suddenly they go 46, 47, and now they can't really read that well. And they suddenly need reading glasses. And like, oh, wow, I'm like one of those people now. Like, yeah, it can happen to you later in life where your body starts to change and you have different, you have different needs to kind of achieve, homeostasis that I don't want to say is more healthy, but it is. Like if you can't see, then you're going to have trouble like reading and staying educated and helping your mind be healthy. And if if you're 50 pounds overweight, you're gonna have a harder time staying active and wanting to go for a walk and, play sports and do things like that. And so, yeah, it's worth, it's worth considering it and more in that context.
And I think it's worth forgiving yourself because a lot of women, since I came out in 2023, I started talking about microdosing GLP-1s and I had I took a lot of hate for it. I took a lot of heat. It was crazy. It was crazy, the backlash I received. And through it, I was getting messages from women saying, I am so severely metabolically compromised. I have so much excess weight on me, et cetera. I have diabetes to this degree or this long. And my doctor's really been wanting me to start on a GLP-1. And I've said, no, because I believed all the hype. And I believed there was such a, the media was just sensationalizing so many things and scaring the bejesus out of people. And people listened to the science-backed information I was putting out and they went and talked to their doctors and they went on a GLP-1. And then they write me back months later, years later, and they're like, completely changed my life. I'm so glad that you put just, even keel, moderate information out. It wasn't sensationalized. It was just, middle road. And because I never once said you get to not do all the things. Like you literally have to do all the things for it to work optimally. I mean, it's like, that's the spark, right? And, these women were just so unforgiving of themselves prior to this, or their families were so judgy, or they were judgy that they were fat. They were judgy that they were on a GLP-1. It's just like, you can't win. And I just saw Jack Osborne, Ozzy Osbourne's son. He recently has been getting into really incredible shape. I suspect he might be using a GLP-1, but that's a kid right there who was tagged for obesity. Like that kid, his mom was obese when she was pregnant with him. And he just went on a rant on his social media, basically saying, because some journalist wrote him up and said he looked ill and this and that. And he's like, I am in incredible shape. I'm in the best shape I've ever been in. And, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. My whole life, I grew up in front of the media and was just torn apart by the media for being a fat kid. And now I'm in great shape and you're telling me I look sick. Like I can't win, and that's society as a whole. And the pushback I was getting from people on the conversation around GLP-1, I was never talking about it for weight loss. I was talking about it for other things. But the pushback I got, so many fatophobic people came at me and just so judgmental. And I'm like, I really hope you never go through a period where your metabolism becomes so compromised that you can't stay in your body composition range that you're used to. Like, I really hope that doesn't happen to you. But if it does, like, I hope that you remember that you said these words, because it was amazing, the obesity bias that just was pouring out of people, that comes out of doctors to this day. I had a patient the other day tell me she got judged up and down by her doctor and telling her that her tirzepatide was going to kill her, and I was like, yeah, it's alive and well everywhere. It's crazy.
It is crazy. And if you're seeking real, sustainable, healthy body composition so you can live a great life, it is not only that. I think really, it's like that type of medication, it fits into that kind of that third bucket I was describing around appetite.
Mm-hmm.
You still have healthy habits and environment. It's like, because you could be on that type of medication, and yes, you're probably going to be less inclined to want to eat really fatty foods or alcohol or some things like that might make you feel sick or even more nauseous on it, but you still can. There are plenty of people that take that medication and they eat with the calories they do eat, they eat cookies and they eat things that aren't good for them. And so it's like, you still have to figure out how to replace habits and environment with good things around you. And you still need, if you want to be like truly fit and more muscular and toned, you're gonna have to do training.
Yes.
And there are still very, very important fundamentals around nutrition. There's fundamental things around nutrition in terms of fiber and in terms of protein and in terms of other types of micronutrients. And you can't get around it. And I just, in my background, it's like I talk and think so much more about the protein and the amino acid component of it, because it is so important when you're in caloric restriction for maintaining muscle and long-term muscle for your life. But the other two are also very, fiber is clearly very important as well.
I think that we should talk about protein, because, protein was like, cram all the protein down your throat as you can the last few years. And I think women are exhausted of that. We're tired of, we're like, dude, that's like a full-time job, right? And I think some of us can't eat that much protein and feel good. It's just, it does not biologically jive in our bodies. And so, or maybe our stomachs can't handle it for whatever reason, GLP or no GLP-1. Like sometimes we just not consume that amount of protein. So something I have really loved is the KION amino acids, because it's insurance, it's backup. I use it in conjunction though. I don't use it instead of. I use it when I maybe didn't eat enough protein to hit the leucine threshold. I'll eat it on top of, I'll take the essential amino acids on top of it. I definitely utilize it around my training along with creatine as well. And recently started using actually your guys' colostrum, which has been totally helpful, really, really impressive. And so I think that when women, I know a lot of women in my circle misunderstood our first two podcasts and thought they could just take essential amino acids instead of eating. And I want to really emphasize that like it all goes together. And then the eating goes with the strength training. Like we're eating the food to fuel the muscle that we just worked so hard to build. That's the sequence. That's what I need women to start thinking about instead of, oh, I'll take the GLP-1. I get this message all the time, Angelo, where people say, I lost 50 pounds on a GLP-1. I'm so glad I listened to you. And I'm like, whoa. I was never promoting like high dose, but okay, that's great. And then they'll say, now I'm going to start strength training. And I'm like, oh no, like how much muscle did we just lose in that process? So let's talk about that, because and even going back to obesity, and I'll get off my soapbox here, but even going back to obesity and the genetic propensity towards obesity, that is still really contingent, and it expresses itself based on your nutrition and your activity level. So it's not a death sentence. Yes, those folks are going to have to work harder than their lean counterparts, but how those genes express and those epigenetic genes or profiles express is contingent on their muscle mass, their exercise habits, their nutrition habits, and their lifestyle. So it's not just like, oh, you have the obesity genes, you're screwed. It's like, no, now you have to even double down harder, but we still all have to follow the same rules. We all have to go to the gym. We all have to get enough protein. We all have to get nutritionally dense food in our mouths,
Yeah, you said so many good things. I'm not really sure exactly where to start. I'll just like go into what came up
I'll
for
shut
me.
up now.
No, I mean, you said so many good things. I mean, I do think protein has been so emphasized the last couple of years, which is good. I mean, I think there's nutrition science and then there's like nutrition marketing, and sometimes they align really well and sometimes they don't. I think it's good for society overall that protein became this really sexy thing to talk about, because particularly for people in more what I'm going to call stress-based physiology, meaning you're under stress of some kind. That includes aging. Basically, when we get to age 40, you can say when you're age 30, but really at age 40, you basically have a stress-based physiology where it doesn't respond to foods the same way they did before. It doesn't respond to strength training the way it did before. But the same thing is true for caloric restriction. When you are restricting calories, you have very different needs for certain types of nutrients. And so when you think about the last couple years, and I think in a really awesome way, I mean, people like yourself and many other physicians, that have gotten bigger platforms talking about perimenopause and the midlife for women and the changes in their bodies, protein was probably something that was underconsumed for that specific group. It probably wasn't for like, your 18-year-old bro son, right? Who's going to the gym. Like he's probably eating enough, but you might not have been. And so I mean, I think there's benefit to it. That said, I agree with you that maybe it is hard for some people. And in some cases, maybe it's been overhyped. Like the amount that someone thinks they need to eat protein, they don't actually need to eat that much. I think when you look at it though, generally across the board, somewhere in the 0.7 to 0.8 grams of protein in a non-stress-based physiology is very good and healthy to maintain and to build muscle. And so that would be in maintenance mode or in a caloric surplus, meaning you're eating more food than you even need because you're trying to get that much stronger. As soon as you get into a caloric deficit though, and I think over the age of 40, you're in a stress-based physiology, and you have different needs actually for protein and specifically for amino acids, which without us rehashing the whole kind of conversation we had in prior episodes, the main idea is basically protein is made up of these things called amino acids. They're the little building blocks inside of it. And half of them are called the essential amino acids. They're the really important part of the protein. And they're really important because your body can't make them. And they actually have a chemical messenger component. Meaning when you consume essential amino acids in protein or in a whey protein powder or in a freeform supplement thing like KION aminos, what happens is your body actually reads the signal of how much essential amino acids is in the blood to decide how much new protein it should make in the body. And maybe people are going like, what do you mean make new protein in the body? Well, your skin is made up of protein. Your hair is made up of protein. Your hormones are made up of proteins. Your muscle, all of your organs are made up of proteins. And actually, all of these proteins in your body have to be rebuilt and remade. And so when you give your body a larger dose of these essential amino acids in food that you eat or in supplementation, your body reads that and says, oh, it's safe and it's good to actually go and rebuild my muscle, rebuild my skin, et cetera. And what happens is basically when you're in a caloric deficit, it becomes much harder to communicate that to your body. And so even just, and this is in younger, healthier, this is in young, healthy adults. So think people like in their 20s, a 30% caloric deficit, which would mean if daily 2,000 calories is like my maintenance. If I eat 2,000 calories, I'm just going to be the same weight. My body's going to be the same, et cetera. If I cut that by 30%, so I cut 600 calories a day, generally that would mean I'd lose a little over probably a pound a week. So it's not that aggressive. And plenty of people that are taking GLP-1s, like they're cutting at least 600 calories a day, or using MyFitnessPal or whatever you're doing to try to, support keeping appetite lower and eating less food. If you cut 600 calories a day, you're going to lose at least a pound a week. When you do that, your body has a 300% increase. So 3 times the amount it needs of essential amino acids to maintain a net protein balance. It sounds really sciencey, but what all that means is if someone's not doing that dieting and you give them a serving of amino acids or of protein, you can kind of determine how much of that's going to get used to rebuild muscle, skin, hair, nails, et cetera. But if you suddenly put them in a caloric deficit, you have to give them 3 times as much. 3 times as much whey protein powder, 3 times as much essential amino acids in order to get the same response out of the body. And the reason for that is because your body's hungry, right? It's in this state where you're communicating to it that, hey, like we don't have food right now. And so what it does is it starts to kind of scavenge. It looks for body fat stores on your body and it starts to use that body fat as energy, but it also starts to look for anything in the food. And so typically amino acids that we eat in our food and protein, your body doesn't think of that as energy. It thinks of it as nutrients to help rebuild muscle, skin, hair. But when it's hungry, it's like, I will use that. It actually converts it into sugars. I'll convert that into a sugar and I will use that as energy. So you need way more. And so I think what people don't realize is you go on, you diet or you go on a GLP-1, you cut calories from your diet. You don't need to just maintain the amount of protein you were eating before. You need to eat even more protein. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to eat 3 times the amount of total protein, but the benefit of looking into something like a protein powder, or even better, a leucine enriched essential amino acid supplement, is that it is going to, depending on your age and where you're at, it can be up to 6 times as powerful as like a protein powder. So a much smaller dose of this essential amino acid supplement is going to provide the benefit. Like, a 5-gram serving could be equal to basically 30 grams of a whey protein powder, or even more of a steak. And so but at the same time, it doesn't really fill you up. It doesn't make you feel like full or stuffed. So the benefit is you can do just what you were saying, Tina. You can eat real meals throughout the day. So like, wake up, and when you're hungry, eat a real breakfast with whatever protein sources you like, whether it's yogurt or it's eggs and meat, fruits, vegetables. But it could be at the same time as when you eat that food, or it could be in between meals later. Having another serving of something like a leucine enriched essential amino acid, something like KION aminos, you're basically able to hit these much higher amounts of total essential amino acid intake, to where you can lose fat and not lose muscle. Because if you don't, you will lose significant amount of muscle. And that's why I think, again, GLP-1s have gotten this kind of bad rap where they say, oh, people are taking GLP-1s and they're losing, 40% of it is muscle. It's the exact same data for non-GLP-1 users too. Yeah. If you go on an aggressive diet
or get bariatric surgery,
and you cut that amount of calories, and you don't either significantly increase your protein and do resistance training, or take essential amino acids, multiple times a day, you're going to lose a lot of muscle. On the other hand, if you do that type of supplementation, you could have much lower levels. You could have like 5% muscle loss, and almost all of it is fat loss. And it's because you are deliberately doing things like doing resistance training. So you're telling the body, hey, this is an organ that's really important. I want to maintain this bicep muscle. I want to maintain these quads. And your body's going to start prioritizing building it and maintaining it. You do things like give it these supplementary essential amino acids, and it's telling the body, hey, no, I really want you to go and rebuild it and keep that muscle. But if you don't, and you just, kind of keep eating what you were eating before, then you could lose 40%. Of the 40% of that weight loss could be muscle, unfortunately.
I want to clarify that a little bit, because all those studies showed lean mass loss, and muscle is but one part of lean mass. And interestingly, I don't know if you saw it, I'll send it to you if you haven't. There was a study that came out a couple of weeks ago showing what I had hypothesized. I've been saying this for years on this podcast. I think that a lot of that lean mass loss is coming from the fatty infiltrate in the liver and the muscle. When you get metabolically compromised, right, you get fatty liver and you get marbled muscle. And I suspected that a lot of that lean mass loss was coming from that being eradicated by the GLP-1, because it just goes, especially like retatrutide, just goes in and chews up the liver fat really quickly. So does strength training, by the way. So if you double them up and piggyback them, you've got a pretty potent way to get yourself out of that marbled mess.
That is really good nuance. That's excellent nuance, Tina, that there's a difference between muscle and lean mass.
It turned out to be true. Like, they just found out in that study that the bulk of it was coming out of the liver in particular. So I was like, okay, so that is really happening. It's not just muscle. I'm not trying to say what you said was wrong. I just want to share that, because I know that the audience he keeps hearing that number, and they're like, but you're so right though. Like, if you don't lift and you don't supplement the protein, whether it's eating protein or using some kind of additional supplementation on top, like, you're really shooting yourself in the foot, because I think that these peptides have a couple different mechanisms by which they can be wasting. They can waste you. And I think we're going to find out sooner than later that there's some mechanisms they didn't know, but like just revving AMPK heavily can start leading you into a wasting state if it's not balanced by mTOR, right? So we have to lift the weights to balance the beautiful benefit we're getting.
there's definitely mechanisms they don't understand yet, because they're seeing that LDL is lowering, A1C is lowering, like all these things are getting better that they don't even fully understand like why and how yet, that are independent of weight loss. And so clearly there's some amazing drugs that are doing amazing things that we don't fully understand yet. I think just one other nuance too I would give with the essential amino acids, and this goes back to, even much older studies from 20 years ago that have continued to be proven to be, show similar results, is that even, and I'm not endorsing not with exercise, like I would encourage everyone to be doing strength training multiple times per week. Even in the absence of exercise. And these were, I can't remember if we talked about the NASA studies.
Yeah, talk about that. Talk about
But
this.
basically, and these were studies that were sponsored by NASA, but they've continued to be shown in other bed rest studies. Like, you got these astronauts in space, they can't really lift weights, there's no resistance training, and looking at how to help them maintain muscle. There were multiple studies sponsored for the University of Texas medical branch where they had people at complete bed rest for 28 days, consuming a normal diet. So it was not a caloric deficit. They consumed a normal diet at maintenance calories, but no movement for 28 days. And they were given leucine enriched essential amino acids multiple times a day. And there was the mean average of the group in general was no muscle loss.
Wow.
28 days, no exercise, in bed, no muscle loss. That is really unheard of.
That's crazy.
And that does show you that taking a leucine enriched essential amino acid in addition to a diet, and that was again at maintenance calories, had the ability to stop basically all the catabolism, all the reduction, the normal muscle loss that you would see in that type of population. And I think in very similar ways, you can see that under other types of stress-based physiologies. We've seen it in groups of older women who don't change anything else in their behavior. They keep the exact same exercise regimen, exact same diet, but they add essential amino acids every day, and they add 2 to 3 pounds of muscle within about 3 months. And same things where it's like you do this under caloric deficit. And there were recent studies for the Department of Defense, actually, because they're trying to figure out, obviously with like soldiers, they have them out in more severe caloric deficit out in the field for a long period of time. Like, what kind of food and supplements and drugs could they give them to help them maintain their muscle? That's where these studies I was quoting earlier about like the 30% caloric deficit required, the 300% increase in essential amino acids, that they're able to have them not lose lean mass under this type of stress, even under caloric deficit, without additional exercise. So there are real targeted benefits from specifically a leucine enriched essential amino acid supplement that is different than just eating more steak. It's not on the same level as doing resistance training, but it's of a more similar sort to that than just being like protein. It's actually distinctly different than just what protein does on its own. Protein on its own is not actually that anabolic. Like, you really need the signal instead of the resistance training itself. Whereas literally a leucine enriched essential amino acid supplement is anabolic on its own.
Like you said, that chemical signal, which is, no, that's huge. And just to put a punctuation point on that information about bed rest, I mean, it's crazy. The longer when my mom was in the hospital, I was like just sitting there fretting because the longer she was in the hospital, the more scared I was becoming. Everyone else was just sort of like, oh, she's getting better every day. And I'm like, yeah, but we have so many studies, the longer someone stays and the elderly stay in the hospital, or somebody going in a frail state, usually an elderly person, the longer they stay in the hospital, their chances of dying just start to skyrocket, right? And it's 2-week mark is pretty bad. And I was just sitting there praying every day, like, please don't let her catch MRSA. Please don't let her catch C. difficile. Please don't let her get some other secondary infection in here. And when she came out, I mean, I won't share her information. The muscle loss that happens when you're bedridden is severe, and it happens very fast when you're in that inflamed catabolic sarcopenic state. You come in frail, you come in usually dealing with some kind of illness, you come into the hospital, you're already frail coming in, you're extremely ill. That in and of itself is an inflammatory process that's puts you in a catabolic state. So you start wasting aggressively and you come out like way thinner. And then there's these percentages that you come out less. So like usually what I was taught in medicine, if somebody loses more than 10% of their body weight due to an illness or an episode of illness, they're screwed. Like, that's bad. That's bad news. And when we see somebody with cancer lose more than 10% of their body weight, or we see somebody with COVID or a virus lose more than 10% of their body weight, we're like, I mean, that's when the alarms go off in my head as a physician. And I'm like, we have to pack weight back on you. We have to get you back going. And so like what you just said isn't just impressive. Like that's pretty crazy that I know they weren't in a catabolic inflamed state. They were just normal people, but add that on top. And like, even if we could just have some help and not full maintenance, but like just some help to not go down into that decline.
With essential amino acids, though, there are human outcome studies and that are actually done like in clinics where they're measuring even the kinetics of the amino acids for almost all of these states. Burn victims, elderly, pre and post surgery, it works in all of these different catabolic states. But you gave an example of when you're getting older, it starts to stack. Being old on its own is like this kind of stress-based catabolic state. And then you put on that, you have some kind of illness, and then you're bedridden. Those three stack on top of each other. It's like your body is having such a hard time to prioritize building and maintaining muscle. It's just not, it's nowhere near the forefront. So what can you do to overcome that? You have to communicate to the body, hey, I really want to protect this muscle. And that's where resistance training can play such a big role. And again, like, and I keep saying leucine enriched because it really is important. A leucine enriched essential amino acid can do that as well.
I've seen some amino acids, essential amino acid product out there that are really low in leucine. They just don't hit the threshold. And I think Kion's what you get, like 2.5, is it grams per serving? Is it around there?
Yeah. And so actually, just to clarify too, so it's actually 2 grams per serving, but this is an important nuance too. So the leucine threshold hypothesis is based on whole foods.
Okay.
Which makes sense. So basically, if you're eating a whole food source of protein, like steak, chicken, eggs, whatever, you need to have this higher amount of leucine. 2.5 to 3 grams typically is like what's been studied. That is in a whole food context, but it is actually not relevant when you're looking at a supplemental form. And just to give you an example of how this has been studied, if you consume 30 grams of beef protein, which is about what you would get in like a 6-ounce steak, like that's actually how much like total protein you would get. If you eat that on its own, it actually stimulates more protein synthesis than if you eat twice that amount, 70 grams of beef protein as part of a mixed meal.
Alone, you eat that amount alone versus eating double that with other kinds of foods?
Yeah,
or
potato, broccoli, which was good. Like,
okay.
And I'm not trying, in no way do I want to, I'm not trying to promote some kind of, orthorexic like eating behavior where you're like separating all your foods. You're like separating your foods. But truly, like, yeah, if you eat 30 grams of beef protein on its own versus if you eat 70 grams of beef protein, but you eat it with broccoli and potatoes and a bunch of other stuff, the 30 grams is actually more anabolic. Why is that? Because on its own, which again, I think I wouldn't be trying to eat the food to get this big anabolic response. I would be thinking about resistance training, et cetera. Like think about supplements more in terms of like increasing really the anabolism. But it is easier for your body to digest that meat, to break apart the proteins, and for the essential amino acids to be released into the blood and to hit this peak concentration. And the more essential amino acids that are in the blood all at once is what directly causes this stimulation of new protein synthesis in the body from the food alone, if you're taking outside the context of exercise. And so it's in that context where you need a certain amount of leucine to be part of that whole food protein that you just ate and digested, and to get it to actually like stimulate this protein synthesis in the body. So what I would say is even that leucine threshold hypothesis is probably really more true for like eating protein on its own. If you're eating this big mixed meal, maybe you need to eat like even more, right? Because it's really how much leucine is getting there to like trigger it. But when you look at something like whey protein, a whey protein powder on its own is about 3 gram for gram. It's about 3 times as anabolic as a whole food protein steak. And the reason for that is because the whey protein, the essential amino acids are that much more bioavailable. There's less going on in the total protein. It's pretty stripped down. And you get to like a whey protein isolate, it's basically just protein. And the amount of leucine in whey is slightly more optimized. It's like 25% leucine. So it's a little bit more optimized. But then when you get to just pure free-form essential amino acids on their own, let's say it's not leucine enriched, it is about 3 times as effective as that protein, as that whey protein. And the reason for that is because even in a whey protein powder, which is an awesome protein source, and steak is an awesome protein source, only about 45%, less than half of the protein is actually the essential amino acids, the part that is doing all the hard work, that's stimulating this protein synthesis. When you take an essential amino, when you take like KION aminos, all of the amino acids are the essential amino acids. So it's on its own, it's so much more bioavailable and it's so much more concentrated in that form. And it's only the part that is stimulating all the protein synthesis. And then this kind of like so then why would you need more leucine in it? Well, when you add the leucine and you make the leucine, like you don't just do like say 25% leucine, which is what whey protein has, which is a good protein source, but you juice it all the way up to the 40%. what we've seen is that in more anabolically resistant states, aging, caloric restriction, disease, illness, post surgery, all of these cases, your body needs an even bigger leucine signal to overcome that anabolic resistance, because it's not prioritizing it the same way. And when you give it that extra leucine, it suddenly starts to way outperform the others, like twice as, it becomes basically 6 times as potent as something like a whey protein in one of those types of catabolic states. And so, sorry, I kind of went on a tangent here, but I was
No, this is great.
addressing this idea of like the leucine threshold hypothesis. That's really in the context of whole food, and probably like I'm eating like yogurt,
Isolated protein intake.
But in these studies, for example, just 3 grams of essential amino acids, of which 40% was leucine. So sorry, my math is kind of slow. Is that like 1.2? 1.2 grams leucine.
Oh, I can't
do the math.
in
Whatever
the afternoon.
It is. Yeah, less than 1.5, somewhere between 1.2 and 1.4 grams of leucine stimulated more protein synthesis. So, without trying to sound sciencey, like had the impact of 20 grams of whey protein in women that were 60. Just 3 grams. So not 3 grams of leucine, 3 grams of total essential amino acids, so long as 40% of it was leucine.
Okay.
So you need this higher concentration. So this all goes back to like the point you were making, that it's like, yes, there are lots of amino acid brands out there that don't have that higher amount of leucine, which is crucial if you are over 40, if you're in a caloric deficit, if you're in any of these anabolically resistant states.
So doctors should basically be handing out the GLP-1 prescription and giving them a bottle of the leucine enriched essential amino acids.
Truly. I mean, I think you would get way better long-term sustainable results.
Yeah, no, this makes sense. I have questions. I'm gonna hit you with some. Timing. So I was under the impression that we should use it around a protein meal to bolster it. Can you take it completely on its own, away from any other food, and get a better result, worse result? What do you think?
The number one most important thing is adherence and daily use. It's very much like exercise and like protein and like diet. It's like, just do it. Like if you just do it, that's the most important thing. So I just want to emphasize that. Now, so whatever you will actually do every day as a sustainable habit is going to create the most amount of benefit. Because it's not like I did it like one day and then I forgot the next day and then I did it around exercise like that. You're not going to get the compounding benefits. So that's the most important thing. That said, there's a good case for both. And what I would say is there are studies that show examples of everything I'm about to say, and there aren't really clear like crossover studies where you compare like, did this group do that much better? What I would say is, in general, if you consume it with a lower protein meal, or even with any protein meal, right? Because when you consume it, it kickstarts this process of protein synthesis because it's so immediately bioavailable and the body reads it as the signal. Then then the actual chicken that you eat with that meal is going to be better utilized than if it was just consumed on its own. And we've seen those kinds of studies when people take, for example, essential amino acids, leucine-enriched essential amino acids plus a whey protein powder. The whey protein powder becomes way more effective. So if you like taking it with food, great. That is absolutely a reasonable way to take it. Just find a habit. Like I take it every morning with my breakfast, whatever works for you. That said, taking it on its own is entirely effective and requires no food.
Okay.
So if instead you like to wake up first thing in the morning and you're not really hungry right away, but you take this is what I do. First thing in the morning, I take KION aminos, I take KION creatine with water. I have my coffee, I have my cappuccino at home that I make. And it's like, and that's like the first thing that I do. And immediately I am generating a signal to the body to start rebuilding proteins throughout my body without having to necessarily eat a large serving of eggs or yogurt or whatever else. And then 2 to 3 hours later, then I have breakfast. That also is a totally appropriate use of it. So in between meals, snack type periods, with meals, it's all good. There's really not a bad time to use it. The only thing I would say is that if you're eating a gigantic steak, I don't know that like that's the time that I would be trying to supplement with this additional dose of these amino acids. Like it probably makes more sense with smaller meals on its own, because you're already giving yourself like a large dose of protein or amino acids at that time. And you're likely just going to get more benefit if it's paired more with like, smaller meals, lower protein meals on its own. But if you like eating it with a big meal, you're still going to get benefit from it because truly on its own, it is creating this stimulus.
The reason I say it is because most women, like I've done group programs where we're just trying to hit our protein macros, and even getting most middle-aged and older women to hit 90 to 120 grams of protein is virtually impossible. They're like, are you kidding? They might eat a chicken breast during the day if they're lucky. They might, they might get 130 to 50 gram serving of protein in a day if we're lucky. I would say that's the majority of women I talk to be completely honest with you. And if I look back on all my patients, same thing. So to ask them to eat 3 times that is like lunatic suggestion. And so what I've said is use the Kion amino acids in conjunction with those lower protein meals, because they're probably getting that broken up into 2 meals. They're getting 30 to 50 grams throughout the day, broken into 2 small meals. That's how most women are eating. And then you add a GLP-1 on top of it, and like, good luck, And the other thing is, I don't want women hearing this and then just leaning on the essential amino acid and not eating anything else. Like, I'm taking here's the thing. They say they're microdosing a GLP-1, but they're not. They're actually taking a standard starting dose. That's what most doctors and pharmacies are dispensing as a microdose. I was talking about a fifth to a tenth of the standard starting dose, like a tiny little bit. So these women think they're microdosing. They're taking a standard dose. Their appetite is crushed. And then they're messaging me saying, well, can I just take the Kion aminos? And I'm like, well, it's better than nothing, but like you still have to eat food,
Yeah, I'll just say why you still need to eat food. Food has other really important micronutrients in it. Like it's not that you're only trying to get these essential amino acids. Like when you eat, and again, finding what you like, whether it's certain types of combinations of whole grains and legumes that are awesome to have lots of fiber in them, or if it is meat that has all types of like iron and creatine and other great micronutrients and minerals in it. Like you need all those things for a well balanced body that actually can function well long term. So that's one part of it. The other part is, like our bodies were made to eat food, and there's really awesome like social dimensions around it too, like being able to share meals with people that you love, and chewing is really good for us. Like there's a whole list of reasons why food is really important, and I get it. Like even as a 42-year-old guy like who is inclined to eat, like I love eating, and I love, like my thing is like trying not to eat too much. Like that's my side of things. Still trying to eat that much protein, it can seem like a lot, right? So I really get it, and I empathize with that. And I watch my wife going through it too. It's like, God, I don't want to eat more like meat. It's gross. Like I don't want to eat that much more like meat or whatever. That it's totally reasonable to supplement the higher end of the protein intake that you're trying to get to with a supplement. And I think that's actually one of the cool things about aminos is if I consume protein powder, you could say it's a supplement, but it's really more of a replacement. It fills me up. Like if I have a protein shake, like it actually fills me up. And that's why personally at night, I do this little chocolate protein thing. I don't do aminos at night to quench my desire for my dessert, because the protein powder actually makes me feel a little full, kind of like the way I get from like an ice cream. What's really neat about aminos is they don't. And they've studied this a lot. It's really interesting. It can reduce cravings, but it does not reduce ultimate like appetite or ability to eat food later on in the day, which is really important for the elderly, and really important for someone like on a GLP-1 particularly. Like if you're just dieting without the assist of a GLP-1 and you have just like ravenous appetite, it might be less relevant for you. But if you just simply don't have the appetite, being able to figure out ways to maybe get in more of those amino acids when you're not eating might be even better. And so that might be the only kind of, it's not a counter to what you said, but if it feels like complicated to try to take the aminos when you're eating and you're already just into eating, but another 1 or 2 times per day, in addition to eating your whole food meals, you take the aminos, that's actually maybe a really great long-term sustainable way to make sure you eat real food every single day, multiple times a day, and you hit these higher daily amino acid intake levels that are going to enable you to have better mood, focus, energy levels, maintain your muscle, organ function, all the things that protein does for your body.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. More questions. Can I mix my creatine with my essential amino acids?
I do it every single day. They are,
Okay. I do that.
yeah, they're very complementary to each other. Yeah.
Okay, good. I do that after I work out, and I will
Yeah.
often throw them in my whey protein shake. So,
Yeah.
next question. Are there any studies to show essential amino acid use with strength training versus not strength training?
Yeah, there's a lot with strength training. I mean, basically, if you, and I'm not saying combine them in terms of like you need to take the amino acids and then do strength training, but just um, them being combined clearly create greater long-term outcomes than doing them on their own. Like, yeah, resistance training on its own has these really great outcomes. Essential amino acids on their own have these great outcomes. And then when they've been combined into studies, the outcomes are even better. Now, on top of that, if you take the essential amino acids, although I hesitate saying this because I really think trying to tie it to the behavior of exercise is almost dangerous for people because then maybe that's the only time they'll take it. So again, I would advocate you take it every day at a time that you really will do it. Like I take it first thing in the morning. But on days when I'm training or during any type of like intense exercise, I also take it before I exercise because the increased blood flow moves more of the essential amino acids into the muscle. And there's a very important synergistic effect where you get that much more benefit from the exercise.
Okay, that's cool. I didn't know that. That makes sense. See, the reason I'm asking you all these questions is because I get messages from sweet elderly women who follow me. I have a lot of women in their 70s and even 80s who follow me. And well, shoot, I'll just say women across the board don't want to strength train. They don't want to hear it. Every single time I make a post about it on Instagram, I lose a ton of followers. People just do not want to hear that this is non-negotiable. And very often they'll kind of, I can see by the way that they phrase their question, they're tiptoeing around this idea that can I take the essential amino acids instead of the strength training? Can I use this to build my muscle instead of? Can I eat the protein instead of? And the studies are showing with the protein, at least, that it's really negligible in comparison to the strength training. The gains from strength training alone are so potent and powerful. Even if you're under eating protein, you still get these phenomenal benefits versus the women out there who kind of got the message wrong and they heard the last few years protein, 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 and they think, oh, I can just increase my protein and that will substitute. And I'm like, well, yeah, you might get more lean muscle mass gains, but it's not a substitute for strength training, and essential amino acids are not a substitute either.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to say that that essential amino acids are going to give you what strength training gives you. If that's, sorry, audience that maybe wants to hear that. Like the strength training on its own, there are many more mechanisms of action at play in strength training that are really important. And yeah, and for sure, protein alone does not, like protein alone is just like not that anabolic. What I would say is in even older populations, this is more, I think these cohorts are more like 80s, maybe they're 75 plus actually, that are not doing strength training just in terms of walking speed, walking endurance, time to like stand up and sit down. The essential amino acids have a pretty significant impact. So what I would say is like, if you're in a place in life where like really resistance training, just like it doesn't work for you. It could, it's tough. Like I've been in, I don't want to reveal too much of my dad's situation, but he had to have like surgery last year and he's just been in pain. It's like, and I'm telling him like, you got to do the strength training. And he's like, I just, I can't, but he is taking the essential amino acids, like 2 servings, 2 to 3 times a day. And it's had a pretty big impact in him being able to maintain more mobility, keep walking, keep doing things, and just maintain more of his strength. So it does, like it is, I'm being cautious, right? Because what I want to say is like, if you really can't do the resistance training, the essential amino acids on their own will be beneficial in a way that whole food protein does not work the same way. And I don't want to let you off the hook. That like, it's like if dad goes, it's like, I really, it's like, just get the 2-pound dumbbells, and just like be using the 2-pound dumbbells, like anything, like any, like, just like even a small step towards it, doing, getting up and down out of your chair. It's like an assisted squat, like,
it's like pulling teeth.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's just, I don't want someone else wiping my ass when I'm 80 years old or 75 years old. I don't want to fall down and break a hip and die in the hospital of pneumonia, which is what comes secondary to most hip fractures. If I do get out of the hospital from a hip fracture, God forbid I ever have one, the quality of life is like, it's a decline. It's just down, and I don't want any of that. And so I really appreciate when I see the elderly folks in the gym putting in the time. I saw this little old guy today. He was not in great shape. He was all hunched over. He was just going through his little machines, though. He was doing his little machine circuit, and I see him in there all the time doing his little machine circuit and doing the little pulleys and I was like, you go, because his chances of falling are so much less than the little old ladies. It's the little old ladies. It's the ladies that generation didn't get any kind of help. They just were told to diet themselves to death in the 70s, and it's a mess now.
I love that you brought up the little machine circuit, because I feel like those get kind of, bodybuilders maybe like them because they're doing all these different types of training, but they kind of get hated on by like contemporary weightlifting, strength training culture that's all these functional fitness gyms and it's all free weights. Machines are great. Like if that's, I almost want to know like the name of one of these women. I want to like talk to you, like Beatrice. Like if you, I'm just telling you, like
Betty,
like you just go to the gym and just hop on those machines and put it on the lowest weight to start, and go with your girlfriend or go alone. And just like, and if you go to like the Y, I think they'll offer you some like free training if you start a new package, and just get on the machines, do the lowest weight, and just go through a few of them. And like, it doesn't have to be some big, hard, complex thing.
The way I train is very specific to my goals and what I'm trying to do and my pain tolerance, because I have all kinds of orthopedic issues. And the way that little Betty's going to train on the machines, she's got different goals. She just wants to be able to pick up her groceries and take them in the house and get up off the ground if she needs to get down on the ground. This is the ability to get up and down off the ground it's crazy, Angelo. I would ask every patient, can you get up? Like that was past a certain age. Can you get up and down off the ground easily? And most of them said no. Even women my age could not get up and down. They're like, oh, I haven't done that in a while. And I'm like, oh, geez, this is not good. So we love that there's things that we can do to improve muscle protein synthesis, but we still got to go to the gym.
Go to the gym. And I would also say do and walk.
Yeah.
I think walking, continuing to walk as long as you can walk, keep walking.
Underrated.
Really underrated. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something to those. I grew up in a suburb outside of Portland that had a huge Vietnamese base of folks. And there was these little old Vietnamese folks that you just see trucking. And then you'd go on your little shopping trip and you'd come back and they're miles from where you last saw them and they're still trucking. I was like, okay, there's something to this longevity piece and walking, because they just kept going. And then the Asian squat, not losing the ability to get down into these positions. These are also important. And I think this is, I only share all this not to get us off topic, but because A, body composition, where we started, B, when we're supplementing, we really want to synergize the essential amino acids with the protein intake, with the strength training. They stack, they synergize, and just relying on one lever or relying on a GLP-1 to lose weight, that's a bad way to go. It just doesn't work as well, and none of these things are free. Walking is free, but if we're going to do it, we're going to put in the time, we're going to spend money on things, like let's synergize them and really get the most impact out of them.
Yeah, it's going back to that kind of framework I offered at the beginning, that I think there's these four things. There's the nutrition component, of which essential amino acids is one piece. There's the exercise component, of which, it's like some type of strength training, anything you can get yourself to do, some type of walking. If you like cardio, do it. And then there's the appetite and kind of psychological aspect of it. Maybe it gets assisted through GLP-1s. There's also just like journaling and thinking about it and envisioning who you want to be, and maybe some type of mindfulness. And then there's still that fourth part around like habit, choosing friends and environments that support you, that want to work out, that they don't, they want to be old together and healthy together with you. And finding little switches. I get this piece of fruit for my house instead of getting, the box of desserts. It's like finding, I think it's really all four of those things. It's not, you can't just pick one.
Yes. Don't marry a gluttonous bump on a log.
Yeah.
That's my message. Yeah. I've done that. It's not a good idea. Hence me being remarried.
Yeah.
No, I love it. I have so much fun talking to you always. I always learn something. You always spit out some cool study that I had no idea about. And I just think it's fantastic. So I want to make sure that listeners know that they can get 20% off if they go to getkion.com/Dr. Tina. So that's KION, getkion.com/Dr. Tina, Tina with a Y. And you guys have a lot of great products. So you've got great whey protein. I drink your coffee every day. I've talked about your coffee on past podcasts. And you've got the colostrum, like I said, that I've been using recently. So that's a really great deal. People should go check it out.
Thanks. Yeah. We also have, I think, really like one of the best, if not the best, omega-3 supplements, which I think is another one of those foundational supplements that really, we don't really try to do like fancy new cutting edge things. It's like, what's the most tried and true that has tons of research that actually makes a difference in your life? And that's another one that I think, I would really advise people to consider.
I do love me some fish oil. I am not one of the anti-fish oil people. So I take my 3 grams religiously.
That's awesome.
And that's where the anti-inflammatory benefits kick in, right? Around that 3 gram mark. That's where at least the way I learned it way back in the day.
I mean, there's probably a whole nother podcast we can do on that. But yeah, basically if you, when you look at like kind of the reduction in all-cause mortality and reduction in specific cases of like cancer, dementia, heart disease, all these things, it's about getting your omega-3 levels in your red blood cells up from like 4% to 8%. And some people are hyper responders, some are people under responders, et cetera. But what I would say is generally, if you're taking about 3 grams a day, I think the pharmaceutical dose is like 4 grams a day when they're actually treating people, but 3 grams a day consistently, you are basically, very likely to get to those higher levels. And that is where you get many of these anti-inflammatory benefits that then lead to all of these other reductions and all these types of disease states. And it really is, I think, again, it's almost a whole nother podcast, but it's like, think about making your blood more flexible. Omega-3s basically make your blood cells and everything much more flexible. And so when you can get it to be made up of more of that than these kind of stricter, harder fats, it has, these amazing benefits.
All right. Well, I'm going to start taking my Kions with my creatine and doing it all regularly because I've been inconsistent. And then I am reminded when I talked. I'm glad you come on regularly because it always reminds me like, oh, damn it. I've been slacking. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Angelo. I want everyone to go to getkion.com/Dr. Tina. You get 20% off and check out all the goodies in there. And we're going to have you back on. Well, maybe we'll talk about fish oil.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I love the conversation.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Tina Show. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson and mixed by Mike Fry. Theme song is by John the Guilt. You can watch the full video version of this podcast inside the Spotify app or on YouTube. As always, you can email the podcast at podcast@drtina.com. That's DRTYNA. And if you like this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find all of my offerings on my website at drtina.com. For more shows by my team, go to wellnessloud.com. See you next time, and thanks for listening. This podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practices of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. I am a doctor, but I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is intended not to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.